guys, what's up? It's Joe Simpson, and today I wanted to talk about fishing rods. And in particular, I'm going to be talking about fishing rods for bass fishing, and more specific than that, it's going to be bait casting rods only. And what I wanted to talk about today is a little bit about the attributes of a fishing rod, how to pick one, if you can only buy just one, maybe two rods, which ones you may want to purchase, and how you determine which rods are suitable for which applications. So let's start by kind of just talking about the attributes of the rods. And I've got a little display back there of some fishing rods hanging in a ladder, and I'll show you how these things bend and what people mean when they say certain things. First of all, there's different actions that each fishing rod can have, and one of them is the strength of the rod, and that's usually referred to as like a medium or a medium heavy or a heavy or an extra heavy, and that usually talks about what they would say is the backbone of the rod, what the rod is actually capable of doing, its lifting power, that type of thing. And then there is the speed of the rod, fast, extra fast, medium. That's referring to the reaction of the tips of the rod and how quickly it gets into the backbone. And I'll explain more visually because it's probably easier to understand. So on this rack here, I've got two fishing rods. The one fishing rod is a heavy, and it's a 6'9". It's a short little stubby thing. It's made by Berkley. It's a lightning rod. It's actually a pretty decent rod, but it's definitely in the budget range. And the other one is from Gander Mountain, and it's kind of a cheap rod, and it's probably a medium to medium light. So let me get some weights and hang on the tips of these things, and I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. So this is going to be the lightweight rod. I'm just going to hook this one first. This one might rotate sideways on me. Okay. So hanging the weight on this rod, the first thing you can see that this rod did was it rolled to the side. And why would it do that? Because this rod actually hasn't been spined or centered up properly. There's actually in each rod blank, if you roll these things and you put them in a certain position, they find a natural bend point. Sometimes mass-produced rods, they don't really check that and they just throw them together, which is the case probably with this one. Or it could be my display, just not being perfect. But if you look at this rod, hopefully you guys can see this from that far away. But this rod actually starts to bend here, and it bends pretty much all the way through. So if I take the weight off of this rod, you can see it bends all the way till about here. It starts to get a little bit tighter and stop bending. But literally this rod is so loose that I would say it bends almost all the way to the handle. This is a medium rod, and it's got a very moderate tip, so it's not a fast tip. Because a fast tip would bend only a little bit at the edge and then get into the backbone quick. So let's compare that to the Berkley. Let's compare that to the Berkley once I hook it. Okay, there we go. So if you look at this rod in contrast to that one thing you're going to notice is right here is the point where that tip gets into the backbone. It starts getting into the backbone very quick, whereas this one doesn't get into the backbone until way down here. This one is coming in really fast. So this is probably going to be a much faster tip, and you can see this rod is straighter for a much longer period of time before it starts to give way to the bend, and overall with the same weight applied to the rod, it doesn't bend as much. So this is a medium heavy rod with a fast tip, if that makes any sense. Meaning the rod bend in the tip very quickly gets into the strength of the rod. That's a fast tip. The rod bend of this tip takes a while to graduate down into the strength of that rod. It's a very moderate to slow tip. But why would you want different rods like this? Well, imagine if you're fishing a plastic worm, a jig, or something that's going to require kind of a quick and hard hook set. This heavyweight rod is going to be perfect for that. Plus, it's got a fast tip. It's going to react very quickly to your motions. Whereas this one, let's say you're fishing a topwater popper, or you're reeling in a crankbait, and the fish comes up and grabs it. Well, those treble hooks aren't necessarily going to react as the same way as a jig would, or a frog hook or something like that would for a bass. So you want that pressure to be gradually implemented into that lure so you can actually pin that fish and keep them on until you get them in. So that's just a quick down and dirty of rod action. Let's look at a couple more just so we get it under our belts here. These rods were already strung up. I just released the pressure off the line that's on them, and I'm going to hang the same hooks on these. Now this rod right here is the Scott Canterbury frog rod, and I got this from American Bait Works, and I've really been enjoying this rod, and we'll talk more details about the way it's built in a second. But let me just get some load on these so you can see how they bend, what they look like. Okay. Now this other rod is a Kask Speed Demon Pro. It's one of my favorite rods. It's very, very lightweight. Matter of fact, I think currently it's the lightest rod that I own, and it is a medium with fast tip. So let's get this one here. Okay. So looking at these two bends and these two rods, a lot different. So this is a frog rod. This one is made to be strong. So you can see right here in the first 1.5 feet, I get right into the backbone of this rod right away. So that means when I'm going to be setting that hook, it's going to react quickly, it's going to hit strength very fast, and it's going to drive home a hook set with no problem whatsoever. This rod is a medium with an extra fast or a medium with a fast tip, and you can see it also gets into the backbone very quickly, but it has a little bit more of a parabolic bend. When you hear people talk about a parabolic bend, they're talking about the rod bending all the way from down below like that. So like glass rods have a parabolic bend, crankbait rods have more of a parabolic bend. So this rod's going to be somewhere between a crankbait rod and like a worm rod because it has a fast tip, it has really nice sensitivity, but it does have a more relaxed strength. So it's a medium, not a medium heavy. And this is a pretty nice all-purpose rod that I use for many, many applications. I can do square bills on this. I can do poppers. I can do worms and jigs, light jigs. So this rod's really a good all-arounder. This is a purpose-built rod. This is basically frogs and maybe heavy jigs, but I just strictly use that one for frogs. But anyway, that's the Kask Speed Demon Pro, and this is the Scott Canterbury. I don't even know what it's just made by Halo. It's the Scott Canterbury version. And there's some unique stuff about this rod that we'll talk about in just a second. Okay, guys. So I have two more rods on the block here. I've got one that is a Piscifun Torrent fishing rod. That's very popular. They're very durable rods, and they're very inexpensive. And I have the Halo Xd3 Pro, and that's one of their new rod lines this year. And just a full disclosure, the Xd3 Pro rod and the Scott Canterbury frog rod were sent to me for free. So I did not pay for those rods, so just want to disclose that. But I'm not affiliated with that company in any other way other than they sent me some free products to look at. And I think we talked about that before with some frogs. But let me put some weight on these rods and show you what they look like. Okay. So first is going to be the Piscifun Torrent. Now this is a medium fast action rod. And this is my square bill rod. And you can see that this rod action type is not too far off of my Kask Speed Demon Pro, the medium one. It's got a little bit slower tip. You can see it takes a little while longer to get into the backbone, and it's a little shorter rod. So if I'm fishing on a bank and I'm nose down, it's easier for me to crank the crankbaits and the square bills and things like that. So this is a really good rod, good budget rod. But the one I like the most, I think out of all my rods right now, is probably one of my favorites, is this one right here. This is the Xd3 Pro by Halo. This is a medium heavy with a fast action tip. You can see the tip very quickly gets into the strength of this rod, and it's got a heavy action, but the action is not so heavy that it feels like a broom handle. It actually, see, one of the things you want in a rod is you want some movement in the tip of that rod because you want to allow for some coiling and some buildup of some strength when you're casting. Like when you go back to cast and you have a lure, it has weight. That weight will coil your rod and kind of load it. So when you cast it, it whips. And you want a little bit of movement in the front because if it was just a broom handle, then you wouldn't be able to throw it very far. So what I really like about this rod is it's got a lot of strength, but it has no problem throwing a little bit lighter lure. So anything from heavy square bills all the way up to jigs, I could do with this rod. It's really, really suitable for so many modes of fishing. So if I don't know what I'm doing, I have 15-pound mono on my Scorpion DC reel, and I put that on this rod, and this is my pretty much everything rod. If I don't know what I'm doing, I'll take that rod, a couple small frogs, I can even fish these little tiny frogs, jigs, worms, all the way down to topwater poppers, whopper ploppers, anything you can do with this rod right here. It's a good all-arounder, so we'll talk more about that one in just a sec. Okay guys, last little bit here. So I wanted to talk about the Scott Canterbury and the Xd3 Pro that I got from American Bait Works. This first one, let's talk about the frog rod from Scott Canterbury. It's got really nice grips, EVA grips with some cork inserts on it. The reel seat is pretty normal. It's about the same as any that I've seen. It does have an exposed section on the reel seat, which allows some sensitivity. But I really love the rod. Now, one thing that really threw me off, I don't know if you guys noticed, but check out from the reel to the butt on these two rods. This is the frog rod. Check this out. Look how much shorter the butt end of that rod is. And at first, it really threw me off. I didn't know what the heck was going on. I didn't know how to handle it. I was like, how am I going to be able to pin that rod against my wrist and set a hook? Because it just felt weird, because I'm used to it coming down all the way to here. So what I realized after using this rod is the beauty of that short stubbiness right here is when I'm on the bank, or if you're on a boat or you're somewhere and you have to work this thing short, you can put it right in front of you and it doesn't dig into your stomach, which is really nice. So you can do, like, you know, when you're retrieving a frog sometimes straight at you, it's kind of hard to come straight down in front of yourself, but this enables that to work. It makes the hook setting range a lot easier. You can do a more proper hook set, whereas usually a 6 to 12 is a better hook set motion than a side to side motion, especially when frogging, because what happens often is I'll be out there with a fishing rod and I'll have this butt kind of under my armpit, and the fish will hit and I'll just kind of panic freak and just kind of like a side over the shoulder hook set, which is fine. But if you can get down and do a straight up, sometimes that's a better hook set. So even though this was initially a negative for me, I'm slowly coming around on this being a positive. I really kind of like it now. I'm getting used to it, so much so that when I use other rods that don't have a short handle, it kind of feels weird when I transition from one to the other, but it's something to consider when you're buying this one. The shaft of this rod's very thick, very strong, very quick. The tip is very fast, but it's actually surprisingly sensitive. So even though it's a very strong rod, you can feel a lot of what's going on at the tip of this rod. This is a 7.5 power heavy, action fast. So it's a fast heavy, and it's a perfect rod for frogging. You can use little frogs, heavy frogs. I have no problems casting it. Now I have a Kask Speed Demon Pro frog rod, and it's a little lighter. So some of the lighter frogs I'll throw on that. Some of the heavier frogs I'll throw on this. So I kind of have like now 2 frog rods, but I really like this one. This I believe is 129 bucks, and it's a pretty good deal, maybe 139. You might want to check it out. It's on American Bait Works website. I'll link below. You can check that out. The other rod I have, which is the lesser expensive of the two, is the Halo Xd3 Pro. You can see it right there, maybe. There you go. Halo Xd3 Pro, right there. This one is labeled as a 7'3" length. It's lure weight 1/4 to 3/4, line weight 10 to 17. And the power is medium heavy, and I would call this a fast. I don't think they spec it as a fast or slow, but I would say it's fast the way that it bends. What I really like about this rod, first thing I noticed right away is the weight. It's very, very lightweight. The other thing I noticed is the eye count. This thing has a ton of eyes on the tip. Now, that's not always a good thing, because the more weight you add to a rod, the less sensitivity you're gonna have. The sensitivity probably isn't like extreme on this, but it's good enough. You can definitely feel, bottom bites, and you can feel jig bites, no problem. But if you were going for something that's a bottom contact rod that you want like supreme sensitivity, this might not be it. But where this rod comes in, I think, and is awesome, first of all, the reel seat leaves the whole shaft open, so you can really wrap your fingers and get contact with your shaft. Yeah. And it's got a little bit longer butt, so it has that feel I like tucked up against my arm for hook setting. And it's really a good all-arounder. This is a good one to take with some heavier poppers, some topwaters, whopper ploppers, spinner baits, chatter baits. I've pulled everything with this rod, and it seems to work just fine. I've even done some light frogging with it. So yeah, this would be the one. It's 99 bucks on their website, and this would be the one. If I could just pick one, I would say this is probably a good all-around rod right here. yeah, and that's about all I got today, guys. I just wanted to talk through some of the rods and reels and introduce you to the Halo fishing rods that I got from American Bait Works. It is extremely hot, so oppressively hot that I just decided that I wasn't going to fish. Pat was sick this morning, had a hurt back, and he said he's out, so I wasn't crying about it. So I stayed home, and as you can see, I'm sitting here on my deck. It's 8 o'clock in the morning, and I'm just profusely sweating. It's already 80, 85 degrees, and I'm going to go inside and make this video, and I'm done. But you guys have a good weekend. I will fish soon. I got a couple new places I want to try out, and hopefully I'll have a monster bass box coming soon, and it will be, I think it's a lunker hunt box, so we'll get to see what's in that. I think I'm going to live stream that one, so be on the alert. I'll try to post it for you guys and let you know ahead of time when I'm going to live stream. And if you guys give me a time of day that works, you know, like Eastern time, because that's where I live, I'll try to post it at that time. So if it's 10 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock at night, you know, 3 in the afternoon, whatever works best for most of my viewers, whatever I hear you guys come back with, I'll go with. So you guys take care, hang in there, tight lines, and I'll talk to you soon. Hit me with questions if you have any. Later, bye.